Greetings, everybody. We are live. I have attorney Christopher Melcher here. We are waiting because the Santa Fe County Sheriff is about to hold a press conference regarding this Alec Baldwin tragedy. They're stepping up to the podium, so let's watch together. So they're waiting, I guess, the sheriff to actually arrive. Again, as Christopher sort of warned, this presser will tell us a lot because they've been doing a lot of investigations on this. Affidavits have come out. They've been gathering more information. Here we go. They don't have good audio.
First and foremost, I'd like to offer our condolences to the Hutchins family, a speedy recovery to Mr. Souza, and our concern for the safety of all the men and women in the film industry. On Thursday, October 21st, 2001, at 1:48 p.m., we were dispatched to Bonanza Creek Ranch in reference to a 911 call advising that 2 people had been shot on a movie set. The first deputy arrived at 2 o'clock p.m. and EMS arrived at 2:01 p.m. It was later determined that Helena Hutchins, the director of cinematography, and Joel Souza, the director, had been shot while rehearsing a scene on the movie Rust. During the initial investigation, it was determined that actor-producer Alec Baldwin was the person that fired the weapon. We identified 2 other people that handled and/or inspected the loaded firearm prior to Baldwin firing the weapon. These 2 individuals are armorer Hannah Reed Gutierrez and Assistant Director David Halls. All 3 individuals have been cooperative in the investigation and have provided statements. Over the last few days, our investigative team has been working diligently to conduct interviews, execute search warrants, and collect and process evidence from the scene. During this process, we determined that there were a limited amount of movie set staff present in the area where the actual incident took place, although there were approximately 100 people on set. Through the execution of search warrants, we have collected about 600 items of evidence. These include, but are not limited to, 3 firearms, approximately 500 rounds of ammunition, and several pieces of clothing and accessories. We believe that we have in our possession the firearm that was fired by Mr. Baldwin. This is the firearm we believe discharged the bullet. Although there were approximately 100 people on set.
I am going to pivot because
through the execution of search warrants, we have collected about 600 items of evidence. These include, but are not limited to, 3 firearms.
This is easier to hear. Sorry.
Approximately 500 rounds of ammunition and several pieces of clothing and accessories. We believe that we have in our possession the firearm that was fired by Mr. Baldwin. This is the firearm we believe discharged the bullet. We also believe that we have the spent shell casing from the bullet that was fired from the gun. The actual lead projectile that was fired has been recovered from the shoulder of Mr. Souza. The projectile was recovered by medical personnel where he was being treated and turned over to the sheriff's office as evidence. We regard this specific spent casing and recovered projectile to be the live round that was fired from the revolver by Mr. Baldwin. We have recovered what we believe to be possible additional live rounds on set.
Jesus Christ.
All the previous mentioned items, along with other items of evidence, will be submitted to the FBI Crime Lab in Quantico, Virginia, for analysis.
Why did they have so many bullets?
We are working thoroughly to gather all the facts of the investigation, continue interviews, and further analyze and process the evidence. I want to ensure the victims, their families, and the public that we are conducting a thorough and objective investigation. In reference to possible charges, it's too early right now in the investigation to comment on charges at this point. The investigation will continue, and if the sheriff's office determines during our investigation a crime has occurred and probable cause exists, an arrest or arrests will be made and charges will be filed. Otherwise, we will complete our investigation and forward the full investigation and evidence to the district attorney for review. Before turning it over to the district attorney, I'd like to thank our investigations division for all their hard work and diligence in this case, the Santa Fe County Public Safety Department, EMS and RACC, and the local FBI office for their support and assistance in this case. Also, the district attorney's office staff that has been working side by side with us during this case. I'd like to introduce first Judicial District Attorney Mary Carmack Altweiss.
Good morning. My name is Mary Carmack Altweiss, and I am the First Judicial District Attorney. Thank you. My jurisdiction includes Santa Fe County. I echo the sentiments of Sheriff Mendoza and want to send my condolences to the family, friends, and tight-knit film community impacted by this tragedy. We mourn the loss of Helena Hutchins and the injury to Joel Sousa. I also specifically want to thank the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Department for so thoroughly and actively investigating this incident. Our office appreciates your hard work, and together we will ensure that this investigation is held to the highest standards. I speak to the prosecutorial perspective here, and I must emphasize that a complete and thorough investigation is critical to DA review. We take the corroborated facts and evidence and connect it to New Mexico law, and we are not at that juncture yet. If the facts and evidence and law support charges, then I will initiate prosecution at that time. I am a prosecutor that was elected in part because I do not make rash decisions and I do not rush to judgment. I rely on facts supported by evidence, cooperative and credible witnesses, and I cannot stress the importance of allowing the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office to continue with their quality investigation that is both serious and complex. So at this point, we will open it up to questions.
What kind of bullet was found? Sheriff, can we ask you, so you said that a live round was recovered. Based on the witness interviews that you've done, can you tell us what you've learned about how live ammunition was on the set?
Yeah, great question.
How it made its way into that firearm? We learned that there was possible target practice maybe earlier that day. What have you learned on that front?
So I think what we've learned is we suspect that there was other live rounds that were found on the set. I won't comment further on how they got there. That's still part of this investigation is active, so I won't comment on how they got there. But we suspect that they are there. That will be determined when testing is done by the crime lab in reference to whether or not they are officially live rounds or not.
Sheriff, how did two people inspect how did two people inspect this gun and not notice there was a live round in it?
That's what we're trying to determine.
Clearly.
The people that inspected or handled the firearm when it was loaded before it got to Mr. Baldwin, we're interviewing. And there's some follow-up questions that we need to do. So there's further investigation, further interviews, and we're going to try and determine exactly how that happened and if they should have known that there was a live round in that firearm.
Rounds found in other guns?
No, I said there was a total of 500 rounds of ammunition. That is a mix of blanks, dummy rounds, and what we are suspecting live rounds.
What type of bullet was found in the director's shoulder that was recovered at the hospital?
Well, we know it was a lead projectile. It's still to be determined by the ballistic analysis by the FBI crime lab exactly what the weight of that bullet is. Maybe whether or not it was fired from that actual firearm. There'll be the riflings and things will be tested and compared. So there's a lot of testing that needs to be done to ensure that projectile left that firearm. And so that's what we suspect.
Sheriff, as the man who pulled the trigger and as a producer on the movie, does Alec Baldwin himself face the potential of criminal charges? And if the DA could perhaps follow up with that as well.
That may be a question better answered by the district attorney.
All options are on the table at this point. I'm not commenting on charges, whether they will be filed or not, or on whom. So the answer is we cannot answer that question yet until we complete a more thorough investigation.
But there is the potential for Alec Baldwin himself to face charges because
Yes.
you've not ruled them out.
No one has been ruled out at this point.
Is Alec Baldwin considered a person of interest right now?
No, that's you.
He's obviously the person that fired the weapon. So we're going to continue interviewing and getting the facts of his statements and the evidence and the case and possible witnesses or anybody that has any information. So right now he is an active part of this investigation.
Is he likely to be re-interviewed?
We hope so. As of right now, everybody is cooperating with statements and interviews.
Sure.
What the next step is? You mentioned this is an ongoing investigation, but specifically for your department, what does that mean specifically? What else do you have to do?
So basically, there are a lot of interviews that have to be done. Okay, we've determined that there were a limited amount of people or movie staff that were actually in the vicinity of the incident. So there's also was approximately 90 people on the movie set itself. So there's a lot of interviews that need to be done still in this case, and that's going to be important. There's a lot of facts that are floating around. I wouldn't say facts. There's maybe facts and rumors that are floating around, and it's our job to figure out if they are facts or rumors.
Clear, what's the actual bullet that was fired? Not a blank, not a dummy. It was like what people think of when you say bullet.
So we would consider it a live round, a bullet live, because it did fire from the weapon and obviously caused the death of Mrs. Hutchin and injured Mr. Souza.
Sheriff, how much will you take?
Found in other guns on set.
How much will you take into account the previous accusations of unsafe practices and negligence on other sets? We know you will for this set, but there are reports coming out from Hannah and David of negligence and unsafe practices on other sets. How much will you take that into account?
Well, that's up to the district attorney to determine how much that's going to weigh, but we are going to follow up on some of those statements that are made, that there were other incidents. We definitely want to speak to anybody that has any information in reference to safety issues on further sets or whether there were other issues, and we would encourage them to call the sheriff's office at 505-986-2490 with any information they may have, so we can get a good idea of what the totality of the circumstances are on this set and what's happening in the industry.
Sheriff, can you follow up on that with other previous movie productions?
And that is something that will play into our legal analysis when we get the completed investigation from the Sheriff's Department. It obviously could play into whether charges get filed or not.
Could you speak broadly about negligence and the thing? I know you said it's too early to comment on charges, but can you speak broadly to what your office is examining when it comes to an accidental shooting versus weighing negligence, like what your office specifically looks at when we get to that point?
When we get to that point, yes, I will speak to it. I don't know that we are at that point yet, because again, we can't say that it was negligence by whom, how many people were involved. We can't say that with any certainty at this point. So when we get to that point, yes, I will speak to that.
Madam District Attorney, you're obviously Sheriff and her district. You're obviously responsible.
I'm sorry. Can you talk about what caliber of weapon was used?
Okay,
Also,
that's you.
there's been a lot of chatter about really target practicing some crew members earlier in the day or the day before. Can you talk more about that?
I will talk in reference to the caliber of the actual weapon that was fired by Mr. Baldwin. That firearm was an F. Lee Pieta long Colt 45 revolver.
Were there other rounds of ammunition in the gun you believe that was fired?
There was other ammunition in the gun that we believe was fired by Mr. Baldwin.
Were those live rounds? Were those live rounds? The other guns that you recovered, I think that's an important point. Any other live bullets in any of the other guns, including the one that you recovered?
From Alec Baldwin.
As of right now, there were 3 firearms that were located on the set within close proximity to the incident. We're still going to determine. We'll send the firearm that was fired by Mr. Baldwin to the crime lab and do a functionality test. Obviously, it did fire a live round. The other weapon is a single-action Army 45 revolver That one looks like there's some modification to the cylinder. It may not be functioning, but that'll be determined by the crime lab. The other firearm is a plastic, non-functioning revolver.
Can you talk about tensions on the set? Reports, people, obviously a crew had walked out and 6 hours before the accident, and people drinking or crew members drinking the night before, lax conditions. Can you talk about that, and specifically, was there tension on the set?
I won't talk about specifics, but we are aware of those rumors or those statements that have been made, and we're going to do the best to track those down.
Sheriff, can you confirm where a camera was rolling when the shot was fired?
There was a search warrant that was issued in reference to any camera footage. There was camera footage, but I can say that there was no footage of the actual incident.
Sheriff, for clarity, how much is Mr. Alec Baldwin's role as a producer factor into the investigation? How much responsibility do you think he actually
I mean, I hate when they repeat the question, Crystal.
I think once we gather all the statements of fact, once we do all the interviews, then that will be weighed by the district attorney to see exactly, what weight that's going to give in reference to her decision to making charges. Not at this time.
Sheriff, can you please give us an update on Alec Baldwin in particular from law enforcement view, how he's been so far?
Just generally, he has been cooperative in this investigation.
Can you describe his demeanor when he...
I won't comment on my perception of his demeanor.
Ask him not to talk to press. Can you
I won't comment on that.
For clarity, was it a live round or a suspected live round?
I'll say right now, until it's proven by the crime lab, it's a suspected live round that was fired, but it did fire from the weapon and it did cause injury. So that would lead us to believe that it was a live round.
Sheriff, can you speak to just the idea of public safety here on movie sets? Sheriff, you're obviously responsible for safety in this county. Just curious about your thoughts about the use of real weapons on the sets of movies.
Well, obviously, I think the industry has had a record recently of being safe. I think there was some complacency on this set, and I think there are some safety issues that need to be addressed by the industry and possibly by the state of New Mexico, but I'll leave that up to the industry and the state to determine what those need to be.
So 2 of the 3 guns were non-functioning guns?
Is there precedent for a case like this in Santa Fe County where you have somebody who fired a gun, did it clearly accidental, he thought it was a cold gun, but other people loaded that gun where it's kind of not the person who actually fired it, but could be held liable? Is there any kind of precedent for a case like this in your county?
No. No, there's no precedent whatsoever.
Into your investigation, I mean, it's a tricky legal battle.
It is a very complex case. It will require lots of legal research and analysis and review. That's what my team is here for, and that's how we're assisting the sheriffs at this point. That said, again, we don't know how that's going to play in until we get that complete investigation.
Sheriff, question for you. Sheriff, 2 of the 3 guns.
Sheriff, was the projectile taken from the director's shoulder, removed from the director's shoulder? Is that the same projectile that killed Elena Hutchins?
We will leave that up to the Office of Medical Investigator to determine, but it's apparently the same round.
Sheriff, 2 of the 3. Sheriff, can I ask you?
Whether there was practice on set, are you investigating whether people were recreationally shooting on the ranch property aside from filming?
We are aware of those statements, and we are investigating whether or not that is true or it isn't true. And I would encourage anybody that has any information that any target practicing or any firearm was discharged away from the movie set or for practice or for whatever reason to contact the sheriff's office.
Sheriff, 2 of the 3 guns were non-functioning. What do you think happened here then?
I'm sorry?
You said 2 of the 3 guns appeared to be non-functioning on that table. What do you think unfolded that afternoon?
Well, I think the facts are clear. A weapon was handed to Mr. Baldwin. The weapon is functional and fired a live round, killing Ms. Hutchins and injuring Mr. Souza.
You know, in the latest search warrant that was just released through the magistrate's office, it notes that Hannah Gutierrez Reed and Joel and the AD that handed the gun all said live rounds should never be on set. Yet there clearly were live rounds on set. So this feels almost like a false statement to police. If the armor is going to say live round on set, yet there was. What's your next step as a law enforcement investigator in this?
We know there was one live round as far as we're concerned on set. We're gonna determine whether we suspect that there were other live rounds, but that's up to the testing. But right now, we're gonna determine how those got there, why they were there, because they shouldn't have been there.
Sheriff, is he Alec Baldwin still in New Mexico, or is he left the state? Do you, or any of the other crew members who are involved in this?
I'm sorry, who were you asking about?
Alec Baldwin, has he left New Mexico, or is he still here so we can interview him, or is he?
He's been cooperative. I'm not exactly sure of his presence whereabouts.
Can you speak
Talk about the path of the gun that was fired, how it wound up on the cart, and what you know about the chain of custody before it was picked up by the assistant director.
I won't talk about the specifics of that. That's still being investigated.
Sheriff, just for clarity, were there multiple rounds in that weapon?
That this may, wrap up and we'll get more information about whether charges may be filed?
Yeah, I'll stay away from an actual timeline. I know, based on what I said, there's several individuals that need to be interviewed, and from those interviews comes new information that we need to track down. So I don't want to put a timeline on it. I want everybody to know that we're working diligently. Our investigative team is to wrap this up thoroughly and completely. And so there is no timeline. We want to get all the facts, get all the statements, and present that to the district attorney's office for review.
Can you confirm that you've interviewed Armor and Gutierrez Reed and the assistant director Dave Phelps?
We have.
Do you expect to re-interview either of those two?
As questions come up, other information comes to light, there may be follow-up interviews, and so I would suspect that we would want to re-interview them.
Sheriff, you said there was a small number of people inside the area where this happened. How come it's taking so long, almost a week now, to get all of those interviews done?
Well, there was a small number of people within the set area where the incident took place. Those people have been interviewed. I'm talking about 100 people on scene in different areas. So those people that were in close proximity to the incident, they've been interviewed.
And just for clarity, inside the revolver that Alec Baldwin used, were there other live rounds inside the chamber?
Not that we're aware of.
Question
How
for
many
DA.
rounds were in that chamber?
The sheriff used the word complacency on set. What is the bridge, and how much do you have to go beyond complacency to get to criminal negligence, hypothetically speaking?
I'm not going to answer hypotheticals today. I will say there is a bridge, and it will take many more facts, corroborated facts, before we can get to that criminal negligence standard. And again, they're gathering that as we speak.
Complacency in itself does not amount to criminal behavior.
I can't say that without specifically legally researching that, but my off-the-cuff answer is no.
And for the sheriff, your experience with firearms, Sheriff, what is your view of such complacency on the set of a movie?
Anytime firearms are involved, the safety is paramount. I'll say that. Anybody knows that. If you know anything about firearms, anytime a firearm is around or about, safety is paramount.
Does it anger you that live rounds were being used on that set?
I don't let my emotions get involved. This is an investigation. We rely on the facts. Thank you.
I love this guy.
Yeah. You said a small number of people. What is a small number?
The information that I received from the detectives, there were 16 people in the vicinity of where the incident took place. Thank you for all your questions. I really appreciate it. But I think that's all the questions we're taking today. Unless the DA would like to entertain any more.
We're good.
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, DA. Thank you.
Wow. First of all, can I just say bravo to this team? That felt organized. We weren't hiding anything, Christopher. They answered questions as best of their knowledge. They made clear why they didn't. I mean, my God, I wish we had that in Northport. I mean, Christ. There just felt like there was transparency as much as they can. They were really stepping out and answering, but then not. I love that comment at the end. I'm not going to let my emotions get into this. So I felt like that was they did a very good job in giving us at least more information about this. But what a tragedy. I mean, I'm just in shock of all these live rounds, everything. Christopher, I want to go straight to you, though. What was the biggest surprise for you? What is your takeaway from this?
Well, it's that there were so many live rounds apparently on set. And I know the sheriff he's great and he's being cautious. He's saying, look, we see bullets. It appears to be cartridges of live rounds on set, 500 rounds that were recovered in the search warrant. There were a combination of either blanks, dummies, or live rounds. Visually, he's not going to say, yes, this is a live round by, just looking at it. He wants to have the lab examine it, which is a careful thing to do. But obviously, there were live rounds on set, at least one of them, and it was in that bullet, and it was a fully functioning firearm that should have never been on the set. I like the sheriff a lot. I'm not really liking everything I heard from the DA. I understand
she was snickering a lot too. Did you notice that? It's very weird.
I think that's a nervous thing. When people are nervous, they act differently, and I think some people laugh, and so she kind of did that. I think that was out of nerves, but still not a great look. I think she was right to say, hey, we're in the middle of an investigation. I'm not going to comment on it because that could be prejudicial to the case later on. That's the right thing to do, but then stay home. If your press conference is, I can't say anything, then stay home. So I didn't like that. I also didn't like that she then was led into answering that hypothetical question. I'm not going to answer a hypothetical question of whether complacency equals criminal, but let me just tell you, I don't think complacency. Okay, I've looked, and I'm looking at right now the New Mexico statutes 3-2-3 on manslaughter. It defines what manslaughter is in the commission of a lawful act, like making a movie, which might produce in death, like handling a firearm. It is a crime of manslaughter to act without due caution or circumspection. So I'm seeing this. She must know this is the statutes that she prosecutes. And of course, complacency involving the use of a firearm is by definition involuntary manslaughter. So she should have never fallen into that trap and said something. I'm also questioning because the sheriff laid out, he said, hey, even though we're still not finished with our investigation, it is absolutely clear there was an operable firearm with a live round in it on a movie set that killed this person. And then the DA says, well, we don't have enough facts yet.
Right.
Well, yeah. What more facts do you need? And again, I'm bringing in industry knowledge of what their safety practices are that are written. So this is not just me saying this. This is written safety practices that govern the industry that say you will never bring a live round on set. You will always check the weapon constantly before handing it to anybody. And you will instruct all people involved how to use this thing. If they would have followed one of those rules, this would not have happened. So I don't know what more the DA is waiting for.
Yeah, it's weird to me because it does seem like I'm going to be surprised if Alec does. I feel like and someone was saying that, I don't know if it was accurate, but I do feel like the armorer is really number one suspect no matter what. Where this case gets complicated for those that haven't been following it maybe as not as closely. Allegedly, and some of the reporters were asking the officer, the sheriff, allegedly what happened was the armorer set the guns out on a table, and then the first AD, the assistant director, should never handle firearms on a set ever. So picked one up, said it was cold because I guess the armorer told him it was cold, and then handed it to Alec Baldwin. And Alec was told it was cold. That's what they say, no live rounds. And then he was rehearsing, and during the rehearsal, it went off, and that's what happened. So clearly the armorer should still be at response, even though, because I've had a lot of debates with crew people. I've been talking to ADs and a lot of people on sets, Christopher. It's like, whose responsibility is it? I mean, clearly the first AD could be even more responsible because, one, he's never supposed to touch these firearms in the first place. Two, as I've talked to any AD worth their weight, you never, ever hand talent a firearm until you check it. And I've seen multiple other weapons experts do videos now saying, I would have ripped that guy's arm off if he had grabbed it from my table without my approval. Every time I go before I live, I open up the chamber, I shoot out every blank, I show the talent, everyone knows, I say cold, and I hand. Like, there's a process, a safety process to avoid all this. So to know that, one, the armorer wasn't there to check it, which is absurd in itself, to me immediately puts accountability, no matter if the AD took it or not, because they're under her jurisdiction, you know the word I'm trying to say, correct? But at the same time, the AD then grabbing it, not checking it, and assuming, who's more at fault? Are they both at fault, Christopher?
Well, yeah. So the way it works is that the producer is responsible for the production of the film, the safe production of the film. And then under the industry guidelines, there's a safety bulletin that applies for the production of a film involving the use of a firearm. And so the producer's representative for safety is the property master. And so it's the property master's responsibility to make sure that firearm is used safely on set, and may delegate to somebody else like the armor. The first AD or AD would never be involved in that process. And like I say, it's common sense that you do not handle anything that even appears to be a firearm without checking it, number one, to make sure it's loaded. And this is ingrained in me. I have a ton of firearms training, so I know I'm bringing that experience on where other people who don't have that training maybe not necessarily know it. But once you had the training, you are psychotic about it. Literally, if my kid hands me a Nerf gun, the first thing I'm going to do is check it.
Right.
And then the second rule of firearm safety is you never point a gun at somebody unless you want to shoot them with it. The third rule is you never put your finger on the trigger unless you're ready to fire. And then the fourth rule that law enforcement uses is know your backstop. So what are you pointing this at, and what else could you hit? And so the industry applies those same rules in this safety bulletin. It says you will treat all weapons as loaded. That's the first line of this bulletin in bold. Secondly, you will instruct everyone involved on how to use this thing and how to be safe around it. You will always check the weapon constantly when you're handing it off, using it, anything. You're constantly checking to make sure it's not loaded. And then you're not putting your finger on the trigger until you're ready to fire the thing. And then you're also doing offsets, so you're never pointing it at anybody. You're pointing it in a direction away from any human, just in case something happens. So basically, you have to violate all those rules to hurt somebody. And then overlapping all of that, there's no reason to have any live ammunition on set because you're not actually shooting anybody for real. So they have a rule prohibiting live ammunition on set, another safety rule. And then weapons should be modified. So here, this is a 1880, so they're going to use a single action Colt, and they've confirmed now this is a real, and this is a big bullet.
Yeah.
It's a 45 long Colt. So if you've shot with a 45 modern weapon, that's ACP, that's a smaller 45 round. This is a full length 45 cartridge. That's why it went through two people. And so that gun should have been modified so that it could not accept a real round, only a blank. And then the safety bullet says blanks can kill, because we know that from other incidents. So that would be all briefed, and even if it was a blank round to make smoke come out and gas come out and making the sound, you would still use all the same precautions. So this, like I say, I don't get the DA's comments at all. This is clearly manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter. There's no question about it. The only question is how many people are going to get charged with that offense.
So, and to answer the question, then back to both the AD, both the armorer, and potentially producers, all could get charged with that, is what you're basically saying.
That's right, because you can't just say, oh, it's an accident. And I hate that word. And again, in law enforcement, they're getting away from this word accidental discharge, because they've had a lot of deputies and officers who have fired a weapon and they say, oh, it was an accidental discharge. No, in kind of modern usage, we'll say there is no such thing as an accidental discharge. Guns do not go off by themselves. And so it's not an accident. It's either intentional or criminally negligent. There's no accident here. So everyone who is responsible in that chain of command to ensure the safe usage of that, what was supposed to be prop gun on set, is potentially criminally responsible. And again, it's not, and I think I hope that the DA has gotten lots of industry expert advice by now by producers, because they will tell her this is not some casual thing where weapons are there and, oh, okay, it's on the little cart and somebody can just grab it. No, this is highly controlled environment. Everyone who's in the industry knows this, and therefore the unsafe usage of that is manslaughter.
Yeah. So look, I love everything you said, man, because this was not an accident. Like that's what's so frustrating to me. This could have been prevented if they had just followed the proper protocols. So while they may claim it was an accident, they were incompetent. They didn't follow the rules that they were supposed to. So there's clearly between the AD and the armorer, to me, they both need to be out of this business. I'm sorry. This isn't cancel culture. This is you guys killed someone because you were not paying attention. Add to that, on top of the producer problem for me is all these previous complaints, right, Christopher? Because there were multiple discharges allegedly on this set. There were a crew that walked out because they, apparently half the cinematographers' own crew walked out because the crew would not pay for lodging near this set. Now, so for you guys don't know, this set is a little far out from sort of where they were putting up their crew. It was like an hour drive or something. And you got to understand, on a movie set, it is exhausting, guys. I've worked I was a production assistant for, that's where I, grit my teeth in the beginning. It's an experience like no other. You work nonstop. You get a little bit of sleep, and then you got to be first there on set to do it all over again. It is a never-ending job. On your day offs, you just try to catch up on some sleep, maybe see a loved one, but you never really do. It's nonstop, 18-hour days, craziness. And so the fact that this crew and this production office was so cheap that they wouldn't give their crew a safe place to rest for the next day was really telling. And that was really where apparently it all came to head, and why this crew was getting really frustrated, because they were falling asleep coming to the job. And that kind of environment that you're setting up is not safe. It's how these accidents happen, and that's not okay. And so the real question for me is, how involved was Alec Baldwin in all those decisions? Was he aware? Alec gets paid a lot. These producers get paid a lot. They try to keep as much as they can and then be cheap in all the production, so they make more money while the crew is, working to the bone to try and get it done for them. Working sets is hard, and the crew should get paid well, because they have no other life. They're there dedicating all this time and energy to it. And yeah, everyone should get paid, because there's a lot of money in this movie industry. And so, and you're like a family on this crew when you're it's like, it's the weirdest experience, Christopher, when you're set. I'm sure you've experienced it a bit, but like, you're there with these people for like 3 weeks nonstop, and all you do is see them, and then you're like, oh my God, and then the movie ends, and some of them you never even see again. But it's this really tight-knit community, and so to know that so many people were upset, were leaving, were frustrated, previous charges, complaints to the production office, these are huge red flags that, to me, don't just point to the two obvious targets, which are the armorer and the first AD, which to me, I'm sure they're already. They must be lawyered up, or have to, because they're dead. They're getting charged. But the clear and why the press is all over this is Alec Baldwin going to get? Oh my God, is Alec Baldwin responsible? And the reality is we don't know. And I like that the sheriff sort of was very clear on that. We don't know yet. He's got to do more homework to figure out, do we have proof that Alec was aware of these conditions? Now, if the wife, the husband of this victim tragedy, Helena Hutchins, a mother, wife, just, oh my God, it makes me so sad, the loss here. But ultimately, like, is it her family that gets to charge Alec Baldwin? Is it just the state? Like, can they sort of say, look, we don't believe it was Alec's fault. We're going to give Alec a pass. We want the crew to take this pass. Can Alec get away on this somehow? Or if the DEA or somebody decides, no, there's proof Alec knew of these conditions, he's equally responsible, he's in trouble.
Yeah, so the state of New Mexico is who brings criminal charges. So the victim or victim's family doesn't play a role in that. Certainly, they can express an opinion or preference for whether charges should be brought or not, but that prosecutor would not be guided by it. It would be guided by whether there's a reasonable probability that a criminal charge could be successfully brought. And so the prosecutor has an ethical responsibility for making sure that there's enough evidence and that a prosecution could reasonably result in conviction. So they'll go through that process, and it is a safety of the community issue. This set is there. It's being used quite a bit. I know a producer who has made films there, and like you said, it's 50 miles from Santa Fe. And the issue with the crew is accommodations, because like you're saying, 18-hour day potentially on set, 50-mile drive each way. The crew does not like having to drive back to Santa Fe, so they want to be accommodated close by. and that's expensive. And so they were obviously trying to cut corners here, and the crew walked out. There's no way Alec didn't know about that. I mean, that's a huge thing. The camera crew walked out of that set, I think, that day and had to be replaced. So there's no way that went unnoticed. I mean, that's a huge thing. I mean, it's mutiny. So there's no way he didn't know that. There's no way that, he couldn't have been aware that, corners were being cut, and that'll go into the mix on whether criminal charges should be filed. The thing is that how many times does this have to happen? We've seen stories. I saw even one going back to Three Stooges where Curly shot himself in the foot with a rifle. How many times does this have to happen until we say, okay, we're making an example out of it? Vic Morrow in the 80s.
Tragedy.
The helicopter, it's like they brought criminal charges. And that's what wakes people up, because the production's going to go on. There's movies always being made. There's insurance. There's new producers. They form these entities just to produce the film, and they move on to the next one. Oh, I'm so sorry somebody got hurt. Let's go on. And the industry obviously cannot police itself. So now we need the higher level to come in and saying, hey, these aren't just rules. It's not a safety bulletin. It's not just insurance. It's not just somebody being fired. Somebody's going to jail. And that's what it's going to take to keep somebody else from being hurt. So I think criminal charges need to be filed. Again, I feel horrible for Alec, because he's just trying to do his job. And I'm sure he never had any intention of harming anyone. And had he had suspected that gun was loaded, he wouldn't have touched it. He would have probably beaten the person who put that on the table loaded. But what it comes down to is hey, you're handed a deadly weapon. You cannot rely on somebody else to say that that's clear. You need to confirm that for yourselves. And again, I'm trying to pull that out of my head, and it's impossible because it's ingrained with the training that I've had. But I got to think Alec has been on so many movie sets and handled so many weapons and been through this so many times that he's got to know, like, you can't just take somebody's word for it that, hey, that gun's not loaded.
No, I mean, that's where it comes, because I did want to mention this other, like, this sickens me. I'm sorry not to make it political, but like when I saw this was making the rounds yesterday, where Don Trump Jr. is selling the shirt guns don't kill people, Alec Baldwin kills people. It's just so, this kind of shit, gross doesn't even begin to describe it, because this is a knock on the victim. It's a knock on the mother and the son who lost. Like, this is so gross to exploit this just because you're mad he made fun of your dad. This kind of shit is disgusting to me, and so I don't like that this energy is out there. However, it's very important to separate. I see some people in the comments saying, look, it's Alec, he's the actor. And that's where I was at too. Like, Alec, the actor, made a mistake. He didn't know. He was told that the gun wasn't loaded. And yes, that may be the case. That still may be the case. But I do think it's important, as Christopher and I are sort of trying to plant these seeds of what's actually happening. If Alec was aware of the constant discharges, if Alec was aware of cutting these corners, if Alec was aware of these walkouts, if Alec was aware of all these conditions and unsafe conditions, I'm sorry, then Alec is more responsible than I thought he was in the beginning, because it's a producer's job, if you're ingrained in the production and you're paying attention to these things, to step up and make sure that your set is safe. If you know your AD's doing all this crazy stuff, if you know the armor's not paying attention, and there was rumors, Christopher, of like one of the child actors held a gun that apparently had a discharge as well. If any of this proves to be true and Alec was aware, or Alec was alerted, hey, we need more money for this, and if any of that stuff comes to fruition, then Alec Baldwin is equally as responsible, in my opinion, on ignoring these, because producers need to step up, and whether it's in name only or not, they need to start stepping up and taking care of these crews, and because it stops with them. The buck stops with the producers. They're the ones who are in charge of these productions. So final thoughts on sort of Alec's place in this? I imagine it's going to depend on what we just find out on how much he knew.
Because I've been, commenting in the press on this, and I got some pushback from a property master saying, that my comment was out of line because, it would delay production. And that is ridiculous. To check that gun would be 30 seconds. How, okay, so fine, we're delaying production by 30 seconds. Alec, here, I'm going to hand you the gun. I'm going to confirm with you physically and visually that this gun is not loaded. 30 seconds in relation to a life. Okay, I think that's worth it. We can spare 30 seconds on this. They're spending hours getting the lighting right. Fucking hours getting the lighting right on that set. But you can't spend 30 seconds to show this guy that there's no bullet in the gun? Are you kidding me?
Well,
So,
he's such a pro, right? He's been around this so long. He's the guy who can take that 30 seconds and not. He's allowed to do it. If Alec gets a gun and he's not even checking it, that just shows the amount of laziness and rules on that set were just so lax that there has to be something.
It's hard, and like I say, I'm trying to pull out of my head the training, the background that I have with firearms, because I know, like, if somebody, any professional that's using a firearm, they will always check it. You could tell them 50 times this is unloaded. I'm always going to check it. That's the rule of gun safety. Now, okay, maybe Alec's been in making these films and relying on the prop master or armorer to say it's unloaded and handed to. Maybe that's just he's done it 100 times. I don't know. He'll maybe gonna have to testify about that background. But to me, with this crew being changed out, with this crew cutting corners, with the accidents that happened before. How does he know this person? I mean, like I say, even if I knew a lifelong friend and was an expert in firearms that assured me, hey, Chris, this gun is not loaded, I'm going to check the gun. There's no way I'm relying on somebody else's word. So how well did he know this person that handed him off that gun to say, I'm going to trust this person word that it's a cold, unloaded gun with somebody else's life, two people's lives? Sure. That's unreasonable to me. I know he's an actor. I know he's blameless in terms of his intention. I feel horrible for Alec. I respect that he spoke out immediately and said, I feel terrible. I respect that he didn't just lawyer up like a lot of people would do. I respect that he met with the husband. I respect all that. I know that he's suffering, but you do not ever take a gun from somebody else without checking to make sure that it's unloaded. And even if I knew that the gun was unloaded, I don't point it at anybody else. I mean, it's a real gun. This isn't the prop. It's not a plastic gun. It's a real gun that he was handed. So I think he's responsible.
Yeah, you asked how well does he know? I mean, and I've spoken to my own personal contacts, so I do trust very well. And the word in that industry is that this AD was not the nicest guy to work with, and there's a lot of complaints coming out. And I like to judge a guy based on all the mob coming out to get him, but I think all this sort of matters in this sort of understanding where this came from. And this was an AD who seemed to just like to cut corners, like to be loud, like to be aggressive. And so one AD I spoke to was like, yeah, no, this guy needs to go. He needs to be charged and well-deserved. He should be off sets. So, in the industry, the first AD, clearly someone who no one's, to me, is first out the door, and should be if he really did it. And then this armorer, Hannah Gutierrez, who's apparently the child of like a famous armorer. Clearly, a lot of people just wondering how she got into this so quickly, how this could have messed up. Look, I do want to hear their side of things. At the same time, there's too much here that I'm just like, what were you doing? Why weren't you there? Why do you have guns in a cart that you're letting your crew members just grab? It's insane. And then coming back to where it all, to Alec, which I think is where everyone's most interested. If he didn't think it was okay to check that gun, we better now. Like this, I had an argument with Lewis, like, oh, why didn't we change this already? Why is it taking now? It's a good question. Why is it taking it so long, right? But I do think this incident hopefully will start waking up actors, producers, everybody like, dude, I ain't touched it. Show me right now that that's empty. Show it to me right now. I don't care how long it takes. Before every take, which we're supposed to do anyway, do that always, because never again are we just dilly-dallying around. Oh, I think this one's fine. I think this one's cold. If anything, I hope this case and us reporting and everybody talking about it really brings it home that we have to be careful in these movie sets. And there's no real need for these real firearms anymore. You can do it all digitally, and I'm sure that was something this production was just trying to avoid, Christopher, because it costs more money to add in all those lens flares later. So, again, questions of how involved Alec was will be determined. We will keep you updated on that. I'm going to clip this for YouTube so you guys have the full thing here. Again, I got to give props to this. I am really impressed with this sheriff. I agree with the DA, though. It gives me a little worry. We'll see what happens. But appreciate you guys staying tuned. We are not done here. I'm going to wrap up with Christopher, and we have some more news to go through. But in the clipped version, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell for all alerts, smash the like button, and leave a comment down below. We're live here every day, every weekday at 12 o'clock. o'clock. And if you'd like to catch the whole replays of our show, you can hit the join button. We're also holding a huge charity stream tomorrow. A lot of special guests, Brian, Nick, and Mel. So many amazing people as we raise funds for DV Awareness Month. I hope you'll join us tomorrow. Stay tuned. Live viewers, we are not done. Just clipping this for the replay on YouTube. And check out Christopher Melcher on YouTube. You can look him up. I'll put the link in the description below.